I think one of the major predominant storylines of this upcoming NFL offseason is going to be where is Jay Cutler going to end up in 2015? I mean, you're talking about a guy who was the highest paid player in the league in 2014 that was benched before the season was even over. I mean, this is something that's been years in the making. I can't wait for him to finally be gone. But where is he going to end up in 2015? There are some teams that would seem to be a good fit. But I think there's one team that kind of stands out above the rest. But I think there's only five real possibilities. You'll hear a bunch of different teams and names thrown out there. But at the end of the day, I think there's only five teams that are even in the running, a possibility. And I think, again, one team stands out above the rest. First, I got to go with the Chicago Bears. It's kind of one of those things that I've been waiting for it to happen for so long. I've been waiting for this team to realize their mistake and move on from this guy for so long. But they just don't do it, and they continue to not do it. And there's still a part of me that has that I'll believe it when I see it mentality when it comes to their approach with Jay Cutler. I think based off of the size of the contract and how prohibitive that could be to trade, combined with the fact that the Bears don't strike me as an organization that would be willing to eat such a huge cap hit just to release them. I think there is a possibility that Jay Cutler would be back with the Bears in 2015 because in part they would say, "Oh, we got to rebuild everything, offense and defense as well, especially." Maybe we keep Cutler in place so we don't have to focus on quarterback. We can focus on these other areas until we're ready to find a new guy. It's a possibility. But we talk about a coaching change in Chicago, probably a GM change, maybe even a team president change. Is another new regime going to want to tie themselves like previous failed regimes to Jay Cutler and his star? I just don't see it. At the end of the day, I think the fan base would ultimately rebel if Cutler was around in 2015. As much as I say I'll believe it when I see it, even I've got to believe that the Chicago Bears are smart enough to understand that the time has come to finally move on. So then we go maybe to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's familiarity there with Lovie Smith. There's definitely a team need at quarterback. You might be some unwillingness to draft a quarterback high if you're Lovie Smith, being that you don't want to see yourself in a long-term rebuilding plan. You want to be a guy that can win sooner rather than later, and maybe you view Cutler as that guy. You look at a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team as well that has some similar pieces in place to what Chicago had in the offensive side of the ball. Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey, Martellus Bennett. In the Buccaneers case, they have Mike Evans and Vincent Jackson and a young Austin Severian Jenkins. So there are some pieces in place. There's not the Matt Forte type of player there, sure, but there are at least some pieces in place. So Cutler on the offensive side of the ball wouldn't be walking into a barren wasteland. With that said, though, the Buccaneers are a bad team. And do you really want to bring Jay Cutler into a bad situation? Is Jay Cutler really going to be the type of guy that you want to provide the leadership that you need in order to stop being a really bad team? Furthermore, that offensive line of the Bucs isn't that great. If he struggled with the Bears line that's at least been solid the past couple of years, how bad is he going to be behind that Tampa Bay offensive line? Furthermore, would Lovie Smith really want to hitch his wagon to Jay Cutler at another location when frankly he did that for 4 seasons in Chicago, and it was one of the reasons he ultimately got fired, was because of the fact that Jay Cutler didn't perform and Jay Cutler failed to stay healthy and be able to be relied upon as a starter that could win big-time games in Chicago. Would Lovey want Jay Cutler to potentially cost him another job? I just don't see it happening. Then you look at the St. Louis Rams, and I do think they're a possibility. They're a team with a dominant front four on defense, a team that feels that defensively they're almost all the way there, and that if they had that quarterback, that veteran presence, they're that guy with better arm talent, they might be able to do more on offense, be a more well-rounded team, and maybe at least be able to compete in the NFC West. And they wouldn't necessarily have to sit there and draft a young quarterback or make a big move up to draft one, wouldn't have to sit there and wait time to develop him. They could plug and play a guy like Jay Cutler right away. There's a possibility there. Maybe a Jeff Fisher doesn't want to deal with a young quarterback. Maybe there's not enough time for him in St. Louis and Les Snead as well, even with some of the draft moves they've made in recent years, to be able to wait for a young quarterback to develop. Maybe they feel that a Jay Cutler is the way to go. But you look at a St. Louis Rams team that doesn't have nearly the weapons on offense that the Chicago Bears do. Is St. Louis really the best place for a Jay Cutler? And again, you're talking about a guy that's 31. He'll be 32 next year. Does Jeff Fisher really envision him being his Kerry Collins type of guy, knowing that Jay Cutler's never done a very good job of taking care of the football? You're bringing in Jay Cutler into a game manager situation where he's anything but a game manager. If you're going to do that, you might as well bring in a young quarterback to be that game manager, so that way at least that guy can grow and get better. Cutler's going to be who he's going to be, and you would be bringing him in under the premise that you're already going to ask him to take a step back and be a game manager, and he's only going to go down from there. And then you look at the Houston Texans. This is a team with talent at wide receiver. This is a team with a legit running game, a team with a very solid defense, a team with the head coach in Bill O'Brien that would like that big type of pocket passer with the strong vertical arm that a Jay Cutler has. There's plenty of appeal there, I think, for Bill O'Brien and the Houston Texans, knowing that they screwed the pooch, not drafting somebody like a Derek Carr or Teddy Bridgewater last year, knowing that Fitzpatrick isn't the answer, Mallett isn't the answer, Savage isn't the answer, knowing that the answer isn't on their roster, and they're probably not in a position to be able to find that answer in the draft. If they don't go the direction of maybe a Brian Hoyer, or they look at a guy like Jay Cutler and say, even though he's older, he has more arm talent and a better overall game than a Brian Hoyer, that's the direction we need to go. You could see a Jay Cutler legitimately end up in Houston. I think that's a very good possibility. It definitely has a chance of happening because a lot of the pieces seem to be in place. But again, if you're the Houston Texans and you're bringing in a Jay Cutler, frankly, how much different is he from Matt Schaub? And if you were so ready to move on from the Matt Schaub era that you traded him off to the Raiders and you brought in Ryan Fitzpatrick to replace him, is Jay Cutler going to really be that much of an upgrade? Is Jay Cutler any different than Matt Schaub? Furthermore, frankly, is Jay Cutler that much different or better than a Ryan Fitzpatrick? That, if anything, is a lateral move. And you shouldn't make lateral moves just for the sake of making a move. So at the end of the day, I think there's one team that stands out as a cut above the rest. And I've thought it for some time, and I've definitely thought it all throughout the 2014 season as I've been daydreaming and hoping and wishing that Jay Cutler's days in Chicago would be numbered. And that is the Tennessee Titans. Jake Locker didn't work out. Mettenberger's not the answer. What else do they have? Charlie Whitehurst. Okay, bottom line is we know that the Titans don't have their quarterback of the future on their roster right now. We also know that they have a head coach in Ken Whisenhunt that prefers to work with a veteran quarterback, whether that was as a head coach in Arizona where he went the Kurt Warner direction or even in San Diego as the offensive coordinator with Phillip Rivers. This is a guy that likes to work with a veteran quarterback. Some of you might say, well, in Pittsburgh he had Big Ben. And yeah, that's true, but Big Ben was a big-time talent, and that was a situation Whisenhunt was in, so he had to adjust and cope and deal with it. But with that said, I don't know that a Whisenhunt wants to take the time and develop a young quarterback. I'm not sold on that. He never really did in Arizona, and that's what I'm going off of his time as a head coach. He never really wanted to devote time to developing a young quarterback that his team drafted. So why would I think he would do it now in Tennessee, especially knowing that the Tennessee Titans have no identity anywhere? The Tennessee Titans are just a terrible-ass football team. Knowing that the Tennessee Titans need help all over the place on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball, he might feel that a quarterback is not the best utilization of resources, that a young quarterback might not be the best way to go, especially if he doesn't feel a Mariota is going to fit his offense, or a Jameis Winston is the type of personality and character that he wants in his locker room as the leader of his team. You look at a Jay Cutler, a big guy with arm talent, that kind of fits the mold of what Whisenhunt would like in an NFL starting quarterback. You're talking about a guy that played his college football for Vanderbilt in Tennessee, so there's some hometown familiarity for the kid from Santa Claus, Indiana there. And you're talking about a team, too, that unlike a Houston and in particular a Chicago, Jay Cutler would have the ability to kind of hide in the woods, if you will. He'd be able to play in a smaller market. He wouldn't have quite the same pressures on him as he would in a Chicago or in a Houston. Or if you threw out another team out there like the New York Jets, oh my God, that's why I didn't even bring it up. You really want to bring Cutler into that disaster? What Cutler needs is a situation where the pressure can be taken off of him. And at least if you say with the Tennessee Titans, what does he have? He has Kendall Wright. He has Justin Hunter. I'm not a huge Bishop Sankey fan, but if you believe in Bishop Sankey, so be it. This is a Titans team that's going to be bad anyways, but there wouldn't be a whole lot of pressure on Jay Cutler alone to turn it around because it would be a great understanding that things are really bad. And there would also be that ability for the Titans, too, to be able to trade for Cutler and be able to use their high premium picks on other positions to help rebuild a roster that so desperately needs to be rebuilt. So when I look at all the other factors and I see where Cutler might end up, the most likely scenario, the most likely landing place and destination in 2015 to me stands out as the Tennessee Titans. Maybe that's why Cutler recently in press conferences has been wearing a Vanderbilt hat. I wonder if that's kind of a subliminal message he's sending to the Tennessee Titans saying that he wants to play in Tennessee next year. Titan fans, I'm sorry to do it to you, but I really believe at this point in time that Jay Cutler will be your starting quarterback in 2015. And all I can say is you can have him. Good luck to you, because God knows you're going to need it.